kind of look through the menu, order something, and we'll get started in maybe 10 minutes ago. We've got John and Dan here. They'll be happy to answer your questions, and we're just going to have a nice informed conversation. So enjoy your meeting.
John's going to
Oh, good, it is working. All right. Did you order, Dan?
I haven't ordered yet.
I think I'm going to get, I'm really not hungry.
What's really good? What's light and really good?
You know what I really like is their vegetable. Hey, Mr. Edge, how you doing? Come sit down. They have like a vegetable omelet thing, frittata thing. John Edge, Dan Fulton.
Nice to meet you, sir.
I'm Jen McDougal.
You can agree that a year delay is probably a good thing. A lot can happen in a year, as we all know. There are legal issues to be sorted out. There are practical issues to be sorted out if fees are to be imposed. You know, who pays what? That's sort of already been said, and there are some significant discounts for people lower income brackets. But I mean, how do you check really who's who? How do you check who's really riding the bus every single day? There's a lot involved here. So the delay is probably a good thing. There's also the little matter of state law that appears to contradict any sort of fee charging for transportation for 6th grade and below. So there's a nice little breathing period, which I think everyone could probably agree in the spirit of a civil discussion that this is a good thing. And John can probably tell you anything that I neglected to mention.
I mean, I think that's the key thing that was the decision. I guess it was Tuesday, it was announced that they're going to hold off for the year and study and as they plan it out a little bit more. And I really think the state concerns played a big part in that delay, and also the timing of everything being so close to the end of this school year and having to get things up and going for the next school year probably played a lot into that delay, I would think. And there's still the concerns with the U.S. Justice Department. I mean, they haven't officially signed off on anything. As far as we know, nothing's been submitted to the court yet for any type of approval with the court, federal court, which would have to, it seems, approve anything that might affect immigration issues. And so those are kind of some of the key elements there, I think.
It's going to be complicated.
John, any inkling yet on where the Justice Department may stand on this?
The Justice Department really hasn't said yet. I mean, the Hoover school system came out, and their attorney said that
That's Mr. Sweeney.
Mr. Sweeney indicated that the Justice Department sort of gave didn't use this word, but sort of a tentative blessing on the idea of fees, although the Justice Department has not actually said that publicly, that I'm aware of, at least. And the idea is that the Justice Department, from what the school system was saying, wanted the school system to set up a process by which they would monitor the impact of school bus fees it would have on ridership and who was riding and how many people were riding and if people could not afford it. And they were waiting on, they wanted Hoover was saying that it needed to set up some type of process to monitor that and submit that for Justice Department and court approval before they implemented anything. Of course, now it's going to be a lot longer. It looks like before they take that action. We really don't know when they would submit anything to the court, but it may be a longer wait if they study it a little bit longer. The State Department of Education, the state superintendent, as Dan was saying, is concerned whether they can charge for the first 6 grades at all. There is a state law that says you cannot charge for the first 6 grades, and I guess that's K through 5. Any fees. The Hoover School District's position has been that it's city school systems are not required to provide bus service at all. They don't have to. There's some who don't. Mountain Brook and Vestavia do not. And Hoover has done it, but they're wanting to stop. Now they're thinking about the fees. But they're saying since we don't have to, is it really an essential service? So if it's an optional service, they were taking the position we can charge fees for an optional school activity. The State Department of Education considers transportation to be more of an essential service based on the words from the state superintendent, and believes it should be fully funded by the state. The state legislature has not funded transportation fully, and that's what's caused this whole situation with the transportation. So Hoover's just trying to make up the difference in what the state does not provide for busing. And trying to remember off the top of my head what the percentage is. I believe it's somewhere in the range of 75 to 80% the state provides, and then the local districts are to make up the rest.
What is the support level in Hoover for charging for bus fees? Charging bus fees. Is it a vocal minority that's opposed to it? Do you have any kind of sense of that?
That's a very good question. I mean, honestly, a real scientific poll would be helpful here. I wouldn't claim to know the answer to that. I mean, there are obviously a lot of people who are very upset, and we hear from them, of course. Yeah, it's hard to know whether that's a representative sample. Very good question. Does anybody have any idea about that? I mean,
is there anyone in this room that supports bus fees?
In the absence of no buses, yes. As a parent, without buses at all, at least there's an option before they even have that option. So to me, it's a graduated thing. But in general, I think it should be supported by the state.
I would have to say that until they give us the real numbers to show that cutting the buses are actually going to help them with their debt, there is no way I would give them more money. None at all. They have over $300 million in debt. 2.5 million, which is what they're saying the numbers are to run the buses. We think it's much less than that. But 2.5 million is less than 1% of that debt. It ain't touching it. They have not shown that they are willing to cut anything else.
I haven't heard anything they said they were going to cut. And what they're doing here with fees, this is not cutting, this is raising revenue.
And this it is raising revenue. And we spent hundreds of hours over Thanksgiving, just before Christmas, going through the budget numbers that we have access to, that we are allowed to see. And we created a report. And there are areas in the entire budget that could be cut to make up that $17 million deficit. We have the report. We were ready to present it at the December 7th meeting. And then it was discussed at that meeting that they rescinded their transportation change vote from the summer. So the gentleman who was working with us at the time said that the president, Paulette, and one other member was going to meet with him and review the work that we had put together. And that meeting has never come about. And the cuts that are going to come, will they make everybody happy? Probably not. But transportation is essential. The children cannot learn unless they're sitting in their seats. And it just appalls me to think that our city is trying to deny the lifeblood, our children, access to a great education, because that's why many of us moved here.
But they've been denied that access for the people like me that live within 2 miles of the school in a non-walking community.
And I'm in that same boat. I've been fortunate enough for elementary school and junior high that I'm within that 2 mile. You can get an exception
See, when I called the board, they didn't say anything about the exception.
Yeah, you can get an exception, and there are exceptions in certain neighborhoods up in Bluff Park because of the way the roads are together.
And the kids
And
can't
your
walk
mouth.
it.
Because I live right off Patton Chapel. There's no way you can walk down Patton Chapel to school. And who wants their child to walk 4 miles a
Go to
day?
Simmons, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Well, I paid somebody $20 a week, which is much more than, he's in high school now, so it's a
Okay.
non-issue for me. I wish I'd known you last year.
No worries, I would have done it.
He's in Hoover High School.
No, he's at School of Fine Arts.
Oh, yeah.
That has always been that way, forever and ever in Alabama. It's not a change.
Even in New Jersey, elementary school, 2 miles, middle school and high school, 2.5 miles.
And in
Okay?
some
The
places,
only
it's a mile
exception,
and a half in some
uh,
states, but that's rare.
the only exception in addition to that is if they had to cross railroad tracks, whether they were active or inactive. But I'd like to bring up some words that the superintendent used twice recently, and that is world-class buses system. Now, we're faced with a situation where there is a gap of 25 to 30% in the funding that the state provides to for the buses, and that has to be locally funded. So I did some research on what world-class school busing is about. It means installing GPS in the buses, transmitters in the buses, and it's certainly a lot more expensive to do that on retrofit than it is on a brand new school bus, okay? And then additionally to put in mechanisms that you swipe a card when you enter the bus and go out of the bus. Not only does that cost money, I mean, so we're going to wind up with a far bigger bus deficit if Andy has his way, okay? It's like the emperor is running the U.S. Federal Reserve. He's printing money that we don't have.
Right.
Well, and if I could say to that.
In South, we call that whistling Dixie.
What's interesting is they claim that this whole bus problem was because of money. But yet all of a sudden we have all this money to invest in these fancy world-class transportation. How do you do such a 180 in less than a year?
Well, let
Didn't they
us
say
all.
that's the purpose of the fees? Is that what they're, was that the implicit argument there?
They're
justifying
there's going to be a huge
Rationalized.
outlay for something like this, with the number of buses we have, the number of students we have, the personnel that would have to be put in place. I've worked with GPS with police departments. It's a multi-million-dollar project, and it's a staged project, and it could take 2 years to have all of the buses outfitted, and it's throwing good money away because we could save that money in other areas.
Well, let us also talk about the 2 years that they did not use the money that they were given by the state
To provide.
for the buses. What was it that they used it for, Tricia?
I'm sorry, I was retreating.
The 2 years that they didn't use the
Oh,
bus
they
money?
used it for locally funded personnel, for administrators, and this was in 2009 and 2010, which were lean years, you know, in the education world, and the state gave them basically kind of a waiver and said that they could use the money that was supposed to be purchasing buses, it's called fleet renewal money, to pay for personnel. And, you know, that now, I got the numbers a couple of days ago, we have, I can pull it up, but less than half of our buses now qualify for fleet renewal funds.
Aging fleet.
We have an aging fleet, which you never want because it costs so much more in maintenance. But this was a decision that our superintendent and our board made and said, we would rather pay these personnel to ensure our transportation system is good in the long term. Now, I don't want to fire people you know, but you have to make adjustments. And that's what Mr. Craig has been unwilling to do, is make these little adjustments all along the way. He's just acted like we haven't been in a recession, you know, and they can claim, well, they made some big old cuts in 2008, but by the second or third month of the school year, all those people were employed again. So it was a paper cut. It didn't really last very long. And it's just what they tell us and what they actually do when you get the numbers are completely different. That fleet renewal thing is really important because, like last year, we get $6,000 a bus for however many buses we have that are less than 10 years old. And that's a nice chunk of money that you can get. It's not enough, you know, it should be $8,000 a bus, but that can buy you new buses. But now we have, I think, 84 or 94 buses that qualify for fleet renewal out of our 190 buses. That's significant. That is that we are at a real deficit there with our buses, and I don't know how. They're going to rectify that. Furtado's one here and one there. Actually, the man with the recorder is getting one.
Yeah, so I'll be there shortly.
Oh, he's going to bring it to you.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks.
So it's how they use their money. You can't always, you know, it's easy to say we don't have enough money, we don't have enough money. You have to realize how much local revenue Hoover really has. And we use that local revenue, that local property tax money to pay for teachers, and which is good, but
We also hear there's no mismanagement of funds, but that right there shows that there is.
well, it was a choice that they made, and the state blessed it, and it's just had some long-term negative consequences for the buses themselves.
Well, for the safety of children.
Well, Dr. Morton was there then, wasn't it? At safety?
Yes.
So it's not that
Dr. Council.
nice. Okay. Tricia, is there any indication they have tried for any grants, so maybe from the Department of Transportation or EPA, because there are programs?
There's $20 million that I found in a 10-minute Google search. $20 million that I found that we could apply for.
Well, the Department of Transportation has a program with $2 or $3 billion in it for traffic mitigation, air quality improvement, and a grant maybe proposing CNG buses, which would be more expensive, but the grant would cover the difference. But then with the new buses, it would be able to save money on operating costs because of the efficiency of the CNG, cheaper fuel. But they are more expensive. But then, as I said, the grant would then pay for that, the difference, and that would improve air quality as well. So, air quality improvement. But it's that's the name of the act, Traffic Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Act, part of the Department of Transportation. And I think it's something worth looking at least apply for. It might be that the city might have to make the application and then work with the board on getting those new buses in place, which with the additional cost, the grant would pay that over what the state is paying for the standard bus, diesel bus.
And we all know grants, you don't just walk into someone's door and say, hi, I've got this, I like it. It takes time and planning, and you have to learn about the people that will be reviewing it, because you have to write it the way that they want to read it. It's an involved process, but it's something that
Long term.
we should have a grant writer for the entire school system. There are so many grants out there for education, and it's ridiculous that we're paying some people in the central office $300,000 a year when you could hire a grant writer for $65,000 and bring money into the school. It is, and have that person and keep up with it. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, money's there.
I'm going to keep going back to the mismanagement of funds. Let's talk about the discretionary funds that the principals get. Why is a principal allowed to spend $600 on an antique desk for their office?
Because the law says they can.
And why we're behind Simmons, I don't know if anybody else has children at
I've seen
Simmons. And I may still have pictures on my phone, but behind Simmons for 3 months, there were desks and chairs, and they were thrown around, and they were standing on a sand pile. And I called someone, and they called someone they knew. And within about 3 days, it was cleaned up. But why was that? Why? That is inventory.
Well, and here's the thing. If you have an excess budget, then I'm not going to question those things. But when we are, again, over $300 million in debt, I don't want to hear about those things.
Let me bring something else into the discussion, because it ties in with the busing, and certainly going to tie in with how the bus routes are going to be. And that is, Hoover is in desperate need for rezoning of the schools, which itself is a major project, because we have students going to Berry Middle School and Spain Park High School who have to travel over 15 miles to get to school. This is not something that makes a lot of sense.
John, can you tell us what Paulette Pearson told you about rezoning? Sorry, I know you're eating.
She indicated that they believe it's inevitable that we'll have to rezone. Andy Craig has said that as well. They have not submitted a plan to the Justice Department for rezoning, although the superintendent has shown some of the school board members some possibilities for rezoning.
Did you say some of the school board members or all of them?
I don't know if all of them have been shown it. I've talked to some of them who said that they've seen some plans. It was not like a meeting where they were shown those.
No,
If it was done, it was done.
He can't be more than 2 at a time.
You met with them individually.
That's my understanding.
And one thing to remember, just everybody keep in the back of your mind, if this rezoning does come about, we've got to make ourselves take a step back, because anybody who lived through the last rezoning knows it's ugly. And people try to drive wedges in between, you know, this neighbor gets to go here and drive 10 minutes, this neighbor has to go here and drive 20 minutes. It's a very tense time, and I think it would really be up to us to keep our heads about ourselves, keep our wits, and realize that yes, it is vitally important. Yes, it is important to every family, but the most important thing is the children. I mean, I know all of us sitting here, I'm sitting here because of the children.
But I want to say something about that last rezoning. In 2004, that came about because there were some elementary schools with high concentrations of minorities and kids in apartments. So I have a friend who did this beautiful spreadsheet, and she's not here today, but her mother is ill, and so that's why she's not here. But she did this, she looked at the ethnicities in 2004, all of the elementary schools, they were perfectly distributed, equally distributed. It matched, every population matched, 14% African American, 5% Hispanic, whatever, white, Asian. By 2005, the numbers had begun to shift. By 2006, they had shifted more. By 2007 and 2008, it was as if no rezoning had ever been done, because people can move, and they go to the school that they want to send their children to. So if let's say you've chosen to live in an apartment because you don't want to do the yard, which is, I'm really thinking about that these days. But so you choose to live in an apartment, and all of a sudden your apartment complex is rezoned from Trace Crossings to Rocky Ridge. And you decide, no, I want to be at Trace Crossings. You'll move into a new apartment. People move, and it's called resegregation, right? People resegregate themselves. It's just what happens. So it's not that you shouldn't look at these distributions, but it's a temporary fix. And what should really be done is that every school should be a fantastic place for kids to learn, regardless of their poverty status or their ethnicity, or whether they live in an apartment or a single-family home. That's the equality that I've been shooting for 12 years, is that every school is a great place for kids to learn.
Right.
And to me, that's the bigger question rather than just rezoning. But rezoning is inevitable because we have one school now, one of our elementary schools is majority African American, Trace Crossings. And it's our first elementary school to ever be majority African American. And I can't imagine that the Department of Justice appreciates that very much. You know, why? And are there great resources there? And are there as good a resources at Green Valley where 40% of the children are eligible for free or reduced lunch? You know, this is like, this bus fee thing is, you know, like the tip of the iceberg. And it's across the country, it's not just Alabama, but Hoover enjoys a great amount of diversity, socioeconomically and ethnically. So John Anderson wrote an incredible column years ago about, I think it was on Martin Luther King Jr.
They're all incredible treatment.
But this was when he got
Some more incredible than others.
And he's a good columnist. He doesn't write a column anymore. And it was about, you know, Hoover could be the place where it could actually work. You know, where we could all, we judge a person not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And are we making that happen, or are we falling back to old ways that follow us around in the South? So, anyway, that's my dissertation for today now.
Tricia, I appreciate you and Arnold too bringing up sort of the big picture stuff here, and I think this is why some editors at NPR have been interested in the story. There's another big picture question here. You know, I think most people agree that there is a right to an education in this society. You can't really get by without one. But does this, and you know, some of the battles of the nation are fought in Alabama still. So does, you know, the other big picture question I think maybe we can talk about a little bit here today is, you know, the right, whether it's a strict legal right or just an ethical, moral right to an education, does that include the right to getting there? And that's a legitimate question. I mean, I wouldn't claim that, you know, I'm not a legal scholar, I wouldn't claim to have the answers to that, but does anybody have any thoughts on that right off the bat?
Constitutionally in the state, there is not
However you
spelled
want it.
out that there's a right to a public education. It's been interpreted that way. And I had the privilege and pleasure of serving on a working committee that was advising, a subcommittee that was advising the Constitutional Revision Committee. It was an informal group, just interested people. And we put together this great wording that was going to give people, you know, that was going to be a very simple phrase. And I used to have it memorized, but I've blocked it now because it was so frustrating. But so the Education Committee that was going to, the official Education Committee of the Constitutional Revision Committee, they couldn't get it passed. There was a gentleman there by the name of Matt Lemke, L-E-M-B-A-T, who's an attorney with Bradley Arant, who made these incredible, it's called the Lemke Amendment now. It never went anywhere, but you know, we know it as the Lemke Amendment, and it basically said, yeah, you can have a right to a public education, but we're not going to give the courts any ability to enforce funding it properly.
Right.
And it was like, what? What's the point? Why are we even doing this then? You know, but it was, the idea was to avoid one of these funding equity suits. And so, no, technically, there's no constitutional right to an adequate, good public education.
And that was the crux of the whole Lynch versus Alabama saga. But, I mean, so if that's the case in Alabama, so there's no real legal right specifically spelled out to an education in Alabama, so let alone transportation.
Exactly.
Right?
Wasn't there an attempt to have a constitutional question basically saying there is no legal right to a public education in the state of Alabama?
A couple years ago, right?
Yeah, there was an amendment.
And it got completely twisted, and I was
double barrel thing.
amazed at how it got twisted, and the support was from a liberal group. Do you remember the details of that?
Yeah, and what it was not the great details. Stephen, do you remember the details? Joey, y'all remember the details? That was shared. The amendment it was 2 years ago. It was on the ballot in 2012. It didn't pass. It was Amendment 4, I think, or something. And
But then it turned into a tax argument, didn't it?
Right.
It turned into a tax because
Right.
of the
Right.
fee.
Right.
They didn't want to have to fund it, which is just what you were getting at, which it's fairyland.
You know why?
Well, it is fairyland, because if we're going to have economic growth,
Yes.
we're going to have economic growth, we're going to have entrepreneurs, and the economy is really pumping away, it's thriving. There has to be education. The students have to be prepared for that. I'm a retired teacher, and I kept reminding myself, this is the future sitting right there in front of me. Now, if I skip, if I don't make sure they're getting what they're supposed to receive as in this classroom, then that's jeopardizing not only their future, but my own future and that of the community. They deserve a quality education, an equal education opportunity.
That's the ethical, I think we probably
Right.
all agree on that, but legally speaking, and then there's the federal question. John, you were trying to say something a while back.
I was just going to say, I hear from people on both sides of this issue when I write about it, and there are a number of people out there who believe that transportation is a parental responsibility, not the state or the city or whatever, the school system. Do y'all have any thoughts on that in regard to whether it's a parental responsibility or is it up to the school district for that transportation?
Yeah, those people who have, in other words, have some degree of wealth or steady income, okay, have more options than those people who don't have that flexibility, okay? And in essence, if I'm somebody who has, and I want to protect my way of looking at it, I'm harming a number of other people. And in a form, this is another type of segregation.
That's right.
It's a difficult thing to deal with because I've been living in Alabama now for 6.5 years, all of it in Hoover. I've got friends who are very, very liberal. I've got friends who make rednecks seem like whitenecks. And I get along with them all, okay, because I'm a more tolerant person than many of the people that I meet whose positions are very entrenched. There's not much in the way of flexibility. And, we're going to be hitting this issue at this next school board meeting, I'm sure, with the Supreme Court allowing prayer at invocation. And what is the school board going to do about it? There was previously dropped because of the threat of suit. Now the threat of suit is going to be gone. How will they or won't they implement it? And this now is going to become another polarizing issue that's going to come up before the school board.
Well, I mean, my personal belief is we got to focus on these buses. What they choose to do with that decision regarding prayer, to me, has such small impact. I know that there was an attempt for prayer to be mandated in public schools this year, but that died in committee at the state level. But we are getting on topic. I feel, this is my opinion, transportation, if you have moved into a city and it is well established that the schools provide transportation for the students, then it needs to stay that way. I keep hearing people say, well, Mountain Brook doesn't have buses. Well, they don't. And everybody who moved in there knew that. They knew that they were going to have that additional responsibility. Well, there are carpools, as someone so sweetly reminded us at a meeting one time. Yes, there are carpools, but you know what? A lot of people work really hard and don't have time to come here for this meeting today. They don't have the wherewithal or the time to come to a meeting at 5:30 on a Monday or 3 o'clock for a special meeting. Life is difficult, life is challenging, and to negatively impact the children of our community, they have no say in this. They have no standing in any of this. It is up to the parents. In my opinion, bus service, transportation to and from school, when we live in a multi-million-dollar school district, spending umpteen millions of dollars on sports and grass and stadiums and $800,000 on cell phone bills for staff, we need to get those children to school. For me, it's a moral issue. It's right or wrong. It is right or wrong to me.
Can I just add another on that point? That we were discussing this earlier about holding up Vestavia and Mountain Brook, and I don't even know, maybe Homewood, as examples of, gee, these are places that succeed without buses. These are little enclaves of homogeneous communities that is nothing like the vastness of Hoover.
More like
we
this,
have, yeah, well, and twisted all around, and we have diversity in socioeconomic areas and in every area. And this is a good melting pot to try and achieve what you were talking about, which is wonderful. So I think it's ridiculous to hold Hoover up to those little privileged groups that made that decision. And I think if someone does an analysis of their socioeconomic status, it'll be very different. Yes.
I did this. I did Homewood, Mountain Brook, Vestavia, and Hoover. And I even looked at the one place where Hoover really stood out. Guess what it was? State championships in sports.
Of course.
Okay? We blew the doors off of the other cities. Right. But it's on this blog that we have kept. My name's on everything, but the ideas are multi-sourced. Tricia Crane. But the site is called HooverFacts, FACTS.wordpress.com. And I said, the post was, so you want to compare Hoover to other over-the-mountain cities. And having been a lifelong Hoover resident, it's really fun to go through and pick all these different parameters. When the school system started, when the city was founded, you know, all these various, and yeah, I chose the parameters, but it's 2 pages worth, and it was one of our most popular posts because it was a real look at how different all of the, Homewood is the most similar to us, but they are very small, and they are landlocked, and they can't really grow a whole lot, and they have a lot of local money.
A lot of sidewalks.
Yeah, lots of, they do things differently.
And your other was Alabama
School Connection, thank you, Dan. AlabamaSchoolConnection.org. I write about K-12 education policy.
I want to ask another question if I can. Do y'all think any level of fees is appropriate for buses, or should? Does anybody?
No, not at all. I mean,
I would have happily paid the fee.
Do you think any level of fees is appropriate for buses?
not if we're planning on charging families who can't even afford to feed their children.
Those of you who are,
And you can't charge only a small part of the population. You have to charge them all.
those of you who have children in the schools right now, what do you figure you're paying right now for fees for each child?
$300 or $400 a year.
Yeah, easily.
And
it's only going to go up.
That's not
when we get to-
extracurricular. That's not like cheerleaders.
No.
That's just, so if you're paying $300 or $400 now per child, and let's say you have 3 children, so that's going to be what, $900, let's say, and now you're paying.
Up front, in July.
And you have $600 for the bus for 3 children. Isn't that about right? $600 for 3 children. So that would be $1,500 right there
For public education.
for public education.
I paid a lady $80 a month so my child could carpool with her. So I would have happily paid the $14 or $20 or whatever it was. I thought the sliding scale was fair. I mean, because if you qualify for the
thing is-
lunch assistance, I thought it was fair.
The problem is, we have families in our community that are barely making it. And an additional $400 to $600 is going to kill them. My daughter goes to school with children.
But they have the option to make other arrangements, just like I did.
Well, but that's not, it's
I
not
mean,
so easy.
I was a single mother living on a single income.
Yep. Oh, no.
I mean, I didn't have a lot of extra money.
I hear you.
So, I mean, granted, I was not poverty stricken by any stretch of the imagination, but I paid for after school care, which was exorbitant. Middle school has no after school care. My son, we arranged all sorts of elaborate school. There was several years that he walked to a friend's house where they stayed unsupervised in the afternoon.
Well, do you think that that's good?
No, I don't, but
So
what
I don't-
choice did I have?
Well,
You know.
the point is, we don't believe that that should have been your choice.
Yeah, but I'm
That
saying
should
I would
not-
have happily paid a small bus fee than go through all
Right.
that. That was my
Right.
But as someone who grew up poverty stricken, this sliding scale is not fair. We were on food stamps. We lived in the hood. There wasn't $20 to rub together at the end of the month.
I find this ironic that this state, was the busing state, right? We've gone through this. We're supposed to be past this. And it's resurging its ugly head in a different form,
Other
in my
places, too.
opinion.
Everywhere.
Yes, everywhere. This whole United States. So maybe the sickness has, spread. But it seems to me that some of the lessons of that era have just faded and we're starting over. And so, I think Alabama gets tired of being picked on by the whole United States as the backward state,
Well, then
right?
we need to be better than 10th of the nation.
Exactly. So I just, this idea that, well, gee, I think, everybody should just pay for that. I mean, weren't we mandated? Their transportation was required at that time, and now we're questioning whether transportation is required.
Right.
I think we already went through that.
But you have to look at, transportation is required for county systems. And even though I think Birmingham broke off in maybe 1922 or something like that, there were very few city school systems at one point. And I have members of my family that can recount when Vestavia decided to break off into the school system. It was after a couple of desegregation orders had been issued, and my brother we were in Hoover, and he had to leave Vestavia and go to Berry and all these things. So, I mean, this was in our lifetime. Yes, people made choices. They formed city school systems to segregate themselves. We have you noticed how many city school systems have been born lately? We've got Alabaster, Pelham, Gardendale. We've got Northport's looking at it. Fultondale keeps threatening to do it. We've added, Trussville was probably the lead of the latest pack of breakaway school districts. Down in Mobile County, Chickasaw City, we've got Saraland, we've got Satsuma. This is the new way to segregate, is to break off and form your own city school system. And I don't know that it's really, I don't know that that's driving it, but I know that the people that you talk to, and the AL.com reporter from Mobile did a great article about the lessons learned from forming a city school district and what they found as it all happened. But it was it's a desire to control your own money. To say, I want to spend my resources on AP classes. I'm tired of distributing it across the county because redistribution of wealth is such a horrible thing, right, in Alabama. So there is this larger, you're right, but there's this larger thing at play, resources that unfortunately those with money, gosh, that's a big broad brush, but sometimes people don't want to spread it out and help. We saw this with the Accountability Act. We had the whole idea behind the Accountability Act was, oh great, we're going to help all these failing schools, we're going to allow these kids to transfer, But then Paul DeMarco and Carnes come up with a bill that says, but you can't come to our school district unless we let you.
Right.
Which was mind-blowing to me. It totally undid the whole thing. It's like, okay, so you're going to tell these kids they're in failing schools, but you're not going to give them anywhere to go. It's ridiculous.
Unless the premise never really was to help those poor kids.
Exactly.
Do you think so?
And I think your comment, which is very interesting, with these separations of their own little districts. Well, guess what? The redistribution of people at different areas, they're going to want to go to better school districts, and they're going to start moving in. And after a while, that's going to change, just as with redistricting. So again, it gets to the heart of just make them all good schools. But
Right.
you know, thinking that you can be protectionist is not the right way to go.
Exclusionary.
And exclusionary, right. Exactly.
Every time I talk to somebody about this from another area, I said, well, it's a budget problem. They said, well, you know, it's not really about the budget. You know what's really going on. They want to chase some people out,
Exactly.
the undesirables. And they tell me that. I said, well, you really believe that? And say, oh, yeah, that's the real reason. A pharmacist told me yesterday that was the real reason.
You know what? At the risk of annoying you all, because I'm not from Hoover, I can't stay quiet about this. This is such an unbelievably fascinating story because it really is a microcosm of something that's happening all over the nation. And there's no community positioned better to succeed at a concrete story right in front of us than Hoover. And you're right that Hoover itself is diverse, but very few people within Hoover live diversely. In other words, most of the white people spend very little time with anyone unlike themselves. And you have a series of leaders who believe, and I get it, I know what they're feeling, I get it. I can tell in their gut. It's an aspirational toward Mountain Brook sensibility. We didn't choose this. We want to be like Mountain Brook. We want to be a successful suburb. And what's happening is poor people are moving in. We have a series of apartment buildings. They're moving in, and our test scores are dropping. And your school board members use words like they. The problem is a lot of the response from well-meaning, thoughtful Hooverians, is that the word? Hooverites is a charitable response. In other words, don't be mean-spirited. We want to help everyone as if it's a matter of charity, when in fact, in my mind, this has nothing to do with charity. And I don't care at all about a hopeful, optimistic vision of a future that maybe could be. Let's just stay dead on to the facts. There's a school in Mobile where every kid is black and 80% of the kids are from single-parent households. Everyone is below the poverty line. At George Hall Elementary School, their fourth graders are performing better than every school in Hoover. They're performing better in reading and math by the time they're in fourth grade than the one in Greystone. They're beating every school. It sort of misses the attention of the school board. And I don't blame the people of Hoover. They're working hard, raising families, playing by the rules. I blame the damn school officials who have put themselves in a position of leadership and have failed to realize that there's nothing inevitable about failure when you talk about low-income community.
Absolutely.
And in fact, the ideal recipe for success out of poverty is what you have, which is aspirational mothers who have left their own neighborhood where they're rooted in their own families and culture to move into a shabby apartment building so their child can have a better chance at reaching their God-given potential. That's a recipe for success.
Yes.
You have 3 huge universities here with Spanish majors. You could have 1-to-1 tutoring of every child here whose English is a second language. Your Trace Crossings hadn't applied for a pre-K classroom, they would get 4 of them. The governor just put $10 million into that. It's aimed at low-income kids. You could have a world-class school in Trace Crossings. The last thing I'll say is this. You talk about teacher quality and principal quality. What a lot of the leaders in Hoover, in this sort of homogeneous, aspirational Mountain Brook mindset don't realize is, increasingly, the best, most talented teachers in America prefer Trace Crossings to any school in Mountain Brook.
That's right.
They would much rather commit their careers and their energy to having a transformative impact on children's lives. Your leadership doesn't even realize they have a recipe for a success story that will become the choice over Mountain Brook. Where do you think residents in cancer research who are coming from California to UAB, where do you think they live? Increasingly, they don't want to live in Mountain Brook. They don't want their kids to go to school with kids that look like them. They're moving to Homewood, or they're moving to Forest Park with me and sending their kids to Altamont. Hoover will increasingly gain a competitive advantage to recruit intellectual capital from around the nation, way more than Mountain Brook, because Mountain Brook isn't set up to do what you all are set up to do, which is embrace everyone regardless of their history or background or lack of wealth, if they're focused on making themselves, creating a better life and achieving excellence in education. It makes my head want to explode because it's sitting here in a more ready recipe for success than literally any community in the country.
Well,
But excuse me, we still come back to the question of who's going to pay for it, which is kind of the bottom line here. Who is going to pay for it?
That's the public bottom line.
Yes.
Well, I think
that is the public bottom.
I think, sorry to cut you off, but briefly, did you publish your analysis of how cuts could be made in other things?
We wanted
Just publish it online.
Well,
You were all trying to be nice, basically. You were trying to.
Okay, that's
we
not
wanted, we wanted to somewhat follow a protocol and present it to them first.
Well, and let's be fair, the idea came from the state superintendent
Right.
of education.
Dr. Bice said do it.
Okay, I hang out at the state board meetings, and afterwards, Dr. Bice gives these impromptu media press junket things, and I said, what should parents do? We were kind of on our last, please help us, we want our buses back. And this was before they decided in December, and he said, maybe you ought to come up with your own solutions, because sometimes the people who are working on the solutions have run out of solutions. And I went, sounds good. So we went back, we put together a group of 20 folks, diverse group. Some of us knew each other, most of us didn't. And we sat together in the hotel meeting lobby. We spent about 20 hours together as a team, and online. We had a Facebook discussion group. We looked at all these budget documents. We came up with, I thought, very solid. We didn't say cut. We said we need to examine these programs for efficiency, and is this a good use of our resources? One of the things, simple things we found, we're paying about $2.5 million in supplements for athletic coaches out of local money. Well, Huntsville City Schools lets their boosters pay that. The boosters give the money to the school system because it has to be on the books, right? And then the school system pays them. So why not shift that user fee rather than, we spread the cost of the football and the athletic programs out to the whole community, but yet we're going to charge these 6,000 kids to ride the bus. So, and we found a lot of things like this. And they were, we had an agreement. They were supposed to meet with the guy who headed our group, and they did meet with him. They actually met with him, and they said, don't you worry, we got this thing under control. We're going to do this thing called strategic planning, and we'll call you and let you know when we need you.
Have they started that?
No. They also said, just give it to us.
Which a document in a vacuum without knowing what we examined and what information we were given from the beginning, statistics, there's a joke, 56% of statistics are all false, and someone else goes, no, it's 82. It's all of them. We would need, and we're open to, a meeting with press and media in the same spot, but let's sit down and hammer them out. Not just come in and go, oh, well, here's $2 million, we're going to shift it to the football boosters, and ta-da! No, more of a, let's talk about this. Well, let's figure this out.
And us just putting it online, unfortunately, they're the ones who have made this into a battle. From the beginning, we have been saying, let us help. Let us see the numbers. And until they release their information,
The specific numbers,
we
couldn't get
cannot
that. We could not get
just put it out there, release it, because they will start using it against us. They did it, they want to cut special education. We never said that. What we said was, when you have this much debt, nothing can be off the table. Nothing. And that's what they would do if we published it online.
And common sense
They would take the things that they knew were going to get people angry, and those are the ones that they would.
I agree with you, and that will always happen, but you shouldn't be afraid to do that. And you can always write up on the top, this is not a claim to cut but to examine, and here are some possibilities, and
We
it's
did.
open to discussion.
We printed out a form and gave it to them.
Yeah.
And that's
The
what we
thing
said
is-
right at the
thing is
top.
to remember that since July 15th, when they voted to rescind the buses, they have not come up with a single item to be cut or modified. Okay?
It's always
As a matter of fact, they have hired more people. We have a head of technology in the school system, very good, capable person. Now, there's an assistant if you take a look at the requirements for that assistant, it's the exact same as for the person who's heading it, okay? They're duplicating things and just adding more and more and more. At what point are we going to run out of money? Is it going to be 3 years from now or 4 years from now? That we will then become a basket case for the state to intervene.
Right.
That's where the problem is.
That may be where it's going.
You can't wait for the last minute to start making the changes. It's got to be coming up with this budget, which is in the process of being prepared right now.
I gather they're hiring more math tutors, Arnold, more math tutors, and also $2 million for Chromebooks.
I've got a question for just whoever wants to answer it. It's my understanding that the system, from this conversation, the system's in a lot of debt. Okay. I also have heard that they had a plan to pay it back and they restructured the way they're going to pay it back. Is that correct?
They did.
So that they've done it like an adjustable rate mortgage now, the interest rate is higher?
Right.
Is this correct? Anybody?
Yes, it
Well,
is.
it's not, John, you covered that when they did it, but
They
basically.
restructured, I think, pretty much extended the debt longer.
So
They
they've
kept-
increased their term?
And it kept.
They extended the debt to
Down per year.
2040. The debt was extended to 2040. As a matter of fact, this next school budget, they will have an extra $2.5 million in principal and interest payments above and beyond what they were this year.
Why?
And it will keep escalating for the next 8 or 9 years before it starts leveling off a bit. And mind you, interest rates are going up. They really did take very good advantage of spreading it out and of the low interest rates that existed in the past 2-3 years. But that is changing now. There are simple things like negotiating with the teachers about teaching an extra period, which is what a lot of the neighboring school districts do, as opposed to having to build additional classrooms, make better use of the facilities that we have. I mean, I drive by some of the schools, and it's an edifice complex. I mean, they're beautiful. I grew up, we didn't have beautiful schools. We had very functional schools. But we tend to go over the top on some of these things. And those are the kinds of things that there are alternate solutions to, but we haven't heard a thing about them. And this board has got to stop acting as a rubber stamp and say, I'm smarter than some of the things that are being proposed to us.
Now, the city can do more. What I keep hearing at the council meetings that they have lost, the council has lost confidence in the school board. I asked Gene Smith and John Lyda about maybe giving them some money for the buses. And Gene Smith, he said, well, you know, that doesn't mean they're going to spend it on the buses. And
That's one thing, and then remember, his world-class school bus system, okay? In other words, they feel that giving the money at this point, before the Hoover school system has shown any fiscal responsibility, is throwing good money after bad.
that's right.
And that is the problem. Show me that you're realistic, that you're doing stuff, then I think the city will help. but the city's not gonna be the first ones to step up.
No.
And I wouldn't want them to.
I'll mention something. The school superintendent has said numerous times, well, we're looking at multiple ways to make cuts and savings. He's met with the state superintendent who just said this week, well, they're not just looking at buses, they're looking at other things. And I don't think at this stage that the superintendent has been willing to come out and say what those other things are.
It's your job to find out, Mr. Anderson.
You know, it's also, I can't make somebody say something.
I know.
Whether they respond to me
You
or
try.
not
I know you try.
is another story. But they've
Unfulfilled
not
open
been,
records requests.
they have not been willing to say what those other areas are.
That's right. Absolutely.
He's been great at delaying the inevitable.
Right.
And the city council also has said, some of them at least have said, we want a plan. We want to see what your plan is to address this $17 million
Right.
per year
Right.
spending. And that, unless it's been presented privately, it hasn't been presented. There are some council members who have not seen it.
And one of the council members said, well, he's just going to let the state take over and we'll be here holding the bag. That's what he's, at the council meeting.
I'm interested to know the comparison of the school bus issue and other economic issues in the school system with the lunch program. It seems to me there's similarities. Parents pay for lunches unless the lunch is subsidized, right?
That's a good question.
Right.
I mean, it's just a question of who bears the responsibility for the cost, the community as a whole, or the individuals, or some combination of the two.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on how you look at transportation. Is it an essential service or is it not? It's
How
like
about
textbooks. Should kids pay for their own textbooks? I have a son in private school. We buy his textbooks. So
George Wallace, by the way, brought the textbook. It was interesting.
yeah. So it's kind of like, this is what we heard Dr. Weiss say in the beginning, which was he really doesn't want to see he believes as state superintendent, he believes transportation is an essential service that should be funded by the legislature, period. That's his belief as state superintendent. And then we've heard him say transportation used to be funded as part of the basic stuff. And then in 1995, when they created their foundation program, they pulled transportation out and put it over here. I don't know who was in power in 95. I don't know, who was calling the shots, I guess. But so transportation became this add-on. And it sort of became the line item that they could mess with from year to year if they needed to take out $100,000 to give to their friend's pet project or whatever. So the legislature did this in 95 by they created the image that transportation was not part of the foundation of education. And I think that this is something that each state looks at differently. We in Alabama obviously consider transportation in our funding to be non-essential. So yeah, if it's non-essential, then I guess they should pay for it. But I also believe that I really don't want to pay for that guy who taught my son 10th grade history to coach, because he didn't teach, he only coached. He was a terrible teacher, and I'd name him except we're on tape. So, he was brought in by the new head football coach, and he got a teaching position because he was this guy's assistant coach. So I'm stuck with this awful U.S. history teacher, which is my favorite subject, for my son. So it's like, where do you pick apart? Which fees should I pay versus which fees should she pay? We've said extracurricular fees should be paid for by those who are extracurriculating. But the real truth is, if they're not, I mean, we've got the community pays for substitutes for when the coaches go off to playoff games. The community pays for. There was a fan bus. Wasn't this John, the Elite Eight or somebody? The volleyball team, the Hoover volleyball team, made it to the Elite Eight, and kids didn't pay for that bus. So we're going to pay for buses. We're going to use community funds to pay for buses to go to an athletic event, but we're going to make kids pay to go to and from school. And so it's this philosophy of, you're exactly right, which fees are appropriate and which ones are not. And I've been looking at fees on the Alabama School Connection. This is something really close to my heart. And I've been pulling apart what these fees are. And what I'm seeing is this trend in anything that's related to an academy, anything that's related to career tech. School districts are charging you $20, $25, $60. Cosmetology is a very expensive elective, y'all should know. So if any of your kids, it's like $60 because I'm sure the supplies. But this whole idea that we used to not pay these kind of fees.
Isn't Dr. Bice concerned about fees in general?
Well, I don't know.
I think he
I've
said,
asked him to be, but
yeah, but I think he said that he was
But
not
I think
concerned
we're
about
also
bus
talking
fees.
two
But
completely different pots of money.
Lunches.
Lunches are federally paid for.
That's true.
A lot of
There's federal money for that.
And school buses are coming out of state and local funds. So we really can't compare.
well, special ed is required by federal.
Yeah.
Do they get any federal money for those? They don't, do they?
Special education is funded at about 18% of the cost by the
Okay.
federal government, and the state and local folks pick up the rest.
But it's mandated that they provide transportation.
By the way, next Monday, here in this room at 11 o'clock, Dr. Melinda Lopez, who's the head of GIS, that's Geographic Information Systems for the city of Hoover, and everything in any level of government ties into geography. And Hoover, as a city, is at the leading edge of this. And so we're going to be having a really interesting luncheon meeting. And again, just like today, there's no dues, there's no application fee. Just come, whatever you have or don't have, you pay for, and you meet some interesting people. So I welcome you all next Monday. That's the Friends of Hoover.
Our time is almost up. I don't want to hold you too late, but thanks so much for the conversation. If you want to hang around and continue talking, feel free, but we are at our time. So,
Is
what
there
are you
going to
saying?
be a listing of who attended? Because there have been a lot of interesting contributions. I'd like to find out.
Certainly, we can go around and we can certainly go around and get names before we publish.
Who wants to start?
Go ahead.
My name is Tricia Crane, and you can Google me and you can find my contact information, my cell phone number.
Oh, you took my pen.
But it's CRAIN, and you can contact me at alabamaschoolconnection.org. You'll find or friend me on Facebook.
Okay. So you find a lot of us at the Save the Hoover Buses.
Free the
Facebook
Hoover
page.
Buses on
Free the
Facebook.
Hoover Buses Facebook page.
Yes, that's a great place to go today.
They changed it to free because of the fees. It was saving, but it's now Free the Hoover Buses.
Your turn.
I'm Pam McDougall, and my son graduated from Hoover High in 2009. My daughter will graduate in 2019. Surprise! And to me, it's a moral issue. If you don't give children an education, if you don't provide an equal opportunity to everyone, then we have no one but ourselves to blame for the outcome. And we need to stop what has happened to way far too many children. And there it's now soapbox. That's why I'm involved. You can find me on Facebook too.
My name's Gianna Zellner.
Let's listen for it.
A very bright daughter.
I have a daughter at Berry who rides the bus, but as I said, I came from poverty. I got out of it because of the education that I received. I got a full scholarship to college, and I'm not, living where I came from, and I think every child deserves the same opportunities I had.
I'm John Anderson, Alabama Media Group.
Yeah, that's right.
And has been covering Hoover for how long, John?
About 15 years.
John
Off and
knows
on,
more
off and
about
on.
Hoover than.
And has has his own children who are soccer players.
Okay, and I'm Laura Tamaris, and I'm a parent. I'm from California originally, took school buses in Los Angeles. So, and yes, just recently, well, not recently, been here for 12 years now. So I'm glad that you're all here, so thank you.
Are your children in the Hoover schools?
Yes, my son is in Bluff Park Elementary, so he's going to go to Simmons, and we've been driving him because we're in that. But they have after-school care there. They have other things. Simmons doesn't provide that, and I assumed there'd be school buses because there always were, and so this whole thing has been amazing to me.
I'm Octavia Karansky. I've been living in Birmingham for about 6 years. I moved here from the West Coast. Conversations about class, which is what it always comes down to, because it always comes down to money, are always of interest to me. I've lived in some major cities, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and this always comes up one way or another. So I came today. I have no children and no vested interest, actually, in Hoover, aside from the moral question, because I'm always interested in hearing how people are thinking about these issues today. Thank you. Great conversation.
My name is Margaret Marston. I have a background in education and law, and I've always been interested in civic topics and in education. I have 3 children, all of whom went through Catholic schools here in the Birmingham area, and I was very grateful for the opportunity for them to go to very high-quality schools, and they all went to college, and they built little houses, and they all look just the same. They're all doing well. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
I'm Dan Carson. I'm a public radio education reporter, and I cover the state of Alabama and sometimes beyond.
I'm Rachel Lindley. I'm the news director at WBHM.
Sabrina Lewis. I'm a Hoover resident, parent of a 9th grader at Spain Park High School. In my opinion, school bus transportation created the Hoover that we know and love. Without school bus transportation, Hoover will cease to exist.
Hi, I'm Robin Hayden, Robin with a Y, Hayden with a Y. I'm a community organizer with Alabama Arise. We lobby the state legislature. I'm very curious to know if you guys are interested in any legislative, advocacy or lobbying around these issues. I'm very interested in the right to a public education, continuing to be enshrined in our state constitution and increasing that right. And I personally grew up in Pelham. I rode the school bus up until my best friend got a crappy Volvo and drove me. And I remember when I first learned that places like Mount Brook and Vestavia don't really have buses, this light bulb went off in my head. They don't want those kind of people. They don't want me and my friends there. So that's why I'm here. I'm very interested to meet all of you, and you can find me on Facebook.
My name is Arnold Singer. I've been living here 6.5 years. Moved from Edison, New Jersey. My granddaughter is graduating Spain Park High School this month and going off to University of Alabama.
Hey. Roll Tide.
There you go.
For the past 40 years, I've been active in local government. I love local government. I've actually become much calmer now than I have been in my previous life. Although I invite you all for a very different kind of presentation that I'm going to do at the next Board of Education meeting. It's going to be different even from me. I've never done anything like that before in my life. You can find me on Facebook, Arnold Singer, or Gmail, dadsinger@gmail.com.
I'm Justin Barkley. I'm a candidate for House District 46, which is the sort of western part of Hoover, what's in that district. Trace crossings up to Bluff Park, through where my wife grew up in Birch Tree, Carisbrook, Lake Crest, that area. I grew up here in Hoover, graduated from Hoover High School in 1998. Riding the school bus until I was allowed to drive in the 11th grade. My family chose to live in Hoover for the quality education. We lived in apartment complexes by Gallery Woods Retirement Community because we couldn't afford to have a house in Hoover. My parents wanted us to live somewhere that had quality education. My parents did not go to college. So I was the first in my family to go to college, so I really identify with some of you talking about the transformative ability of education as far as that goes. So I really enjoyed the conversation, enjoyed hearing the perspectives here.
I ask you a quick question, Mr. Bart. Would you favor 100% funding by the state of school transportation?
I'll tell you, that's a real tough thing. I'll tell you why, because every time you fight about what comes out of the Education Trust Fund, if it doesn't go to teacher pay, then you have a real fight on your hands about that. So, you know, the bottom line is there's not enough money to go around to all sorts of worthwhile things. So you say, well, let's fund it 100% from the state level. What are you taking the money from to do that? You know, whether you want higher taxes or more taxes or not, we all know that the political reality in Alabama is we're not going to get any greater revenue anytime soon. So it depends on what as in all things in life, what are the trade-offs?
By the way, just realize you have just witnessed a non-pandering political candidate.
Yeah.
He didn't give you the answer you were looking for. He gave you the honest answer. And
can I mention something too? Because this is really important. You folks who are interested in this conversation before you leave. Okay. In June, I understand it's going to be at the June State Board of Education work session. They will be unveiling a proposal consideration for a new way to fund public schools in Alabama. They've been studying it for about a year. Let's hope not. They hired this very expensive group out of Colorado that has been around and has helped make modifications. Now, politically, if it is a redistribution type of, similar to, I think it's Maryland that does where you've got this basic program per student, and then you've got more money for at-risk kids that is allotted based on your kids who are at risk. That is going to be an uphill political battle in Alabama. And while I try not to be political, I do believe, nobody laughed. I gave you a look. I do believe that if this is what they are saying it is going to be, it will be a better way and will benefit a place like Hoover. So I hope that those of you who are interested will, take the time. I'll write about it. Everybody will write about it, and then make your feelings known to your legislators, because we might have some new ones in after November, and this will go before them next legislative session. And it's going to have a lot of political will to change the way we fund schools. Sorry. 2 cents.
Yeah, that's grew up in Hoover. We live in Homewood now, and I appreciate what was said about the diversity. That's the reason we live in Homewood. Is that it's a similar diversity profile to Hoover. I'll tell one quick story. My wife says the only time she ever heard her dad swear, he's an accountant. In the middle of tax season, her little brother missed the school bus, and he said, "You better get on the school bus. I have to go to work." So that's the only time she ever heard her father say a swear word. So thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. No,
Any yard signs?
Yeah, I have them in my car. If anyone wants a yard sign, www.justinbarkley.com. I'm on Facebook. I have an individual Facebook page. Obviously, you can find the Justin Barkley. And I have a campaign site that's Friends of Justin Barkley. It's the Republican primary June 3rd. Even if you're not a Republican, we're going to have a Republican representative for this area. It's an overwhelming Republican area.
Everybody can vote in the primary.
Everybody can vote in the primary.
Are you going to be at the event tonight, the Meet the Candidate event tonight?
For the congressional candidates?
Are you going to be there?
I'm not.
Is that just the congressional candidates tonight?
It's just for congressional candidates. Yes.
That's June 3rd. Is that right, June 3rd?
June 3rd, Republican primary, yes. I'm going to say it, yeah.
My name is Belinda Brown. I have two children that are in the Hoover school system, one that's in middle school and one that's in high school. And I do think the bus service is very essential. I'm a single parent. I work. And
Hoover High School?
Hoover High School and Simmons Middle School. And so the buses have been very needed for myself and getting my children back and forth to school. And I think it is an essential service. But something else that we need to consider is that it's not only an essential service, but we have parents that have medical conditions and have legal problems that cannot drive.
Please come to the board meetings. They let you comment. Just say just what you said at the board meeting. Let them hear that every board meeting.
I'm Joey Kennedy, and I'm a community engagement specialist with the Alabama Media Group, bailout.com, and Birmingham News. And I rode a school bus all 12 years of my public education, but not here. It was in Louisiana.
And he also does incredible writing and reports.
We got a Pulitzer Prize.
I have, yeah. Very good. And has some beautiful pets.
I'm a pug person.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm Edward Bowser. I'm at Alabama Media Group, Joey's counterpart, another community engagement specialist.
I'm Audrey Atkins. I'm the marketing manager at WBHM. I also happen to be a Hoover parent. So.
I'm Curtis Frazier. I have two kids in the Hoover City School System. One's going to be at Bumpus next year, and another one at Brock's Gap. And we will need a bus to get my oldest one to Bumpus, because we will have to go through two different school districts and deal with that traffic in both just to get him to school.
I'm Dan Fulton. My legal residence has been Alford Avenue since 1956. I went to the University of Alabama, and I'm a retired teacher from Birmingham City, 27 years, Jackson Oldham department head. And I consider school bus service as an essential service. Attendance is very important to the regular teacher. If the student is not in class every day, then you can't really teach them, no matter how you lesson. I've had Mr. Kennedy to visit my classroom and talk about the importance of writing, and the student's not there. There's no benefit. And he may move just one student to become a great writer. And the school bus makes sure those students are there. Students need structure and regularity, and they, of course, need safety. And the school bus provides all of that.
And it's John.
I'm John Edge. I've lived in Hoover for 55 years. I'm 58 years old. I was here before it was Hoover, and I'm a Hoover City School bus driver.
Oh.
Very good.
I would like to see the buses stay because I would like to keep my job. I'm going to be honest, but I also understand. I drive out of Berry Middle School, and I fight Valleydale Road traffic every day, and 3 out of every 4 children ride the bus to Berry Middle School. Can you imagine the traffic on Caldwell Mill, Valleydale, all that? I start backing up just past, headed towards Berry, just past Inverness Elementary School every morning. Can you imagine what would happen if they do away with buses?
How long does it take you to drive your route?
Well, I discussed that this morning. You mean from the time I get to the bus? I get to the bus at 6:20.
Okay.
My first stop is 7:52. I take 5 minutes to myself to get prepared for middle schoolers. I pull over at a certain spot, and I sit there and I take a minute, and I take a few deep breaths and say, okay, here we go. And then I go pick them up. I usually arrive at school on a bad day, 7:50.
Now you do two runs?
No, this is one run.
Okay.
I get them to school by 10 minutes of 8 on the late end, and I've been a real lucky person that got them there as early as 20 minutes to late. So it takes me about an hour and 15 minutes to run the route. But all the other stuff that's involved, pre-trip in the bus, post-trip in the bus, fuel in the bus, checking the bus,
It's about the same going home.
Going home seems to be faster because the kids get off the bus quicker.
Let me point out something. EMA, they're part of the EMA plan. So if for some reason there has to be a fast evacuation, you get contacted, isn't that right?
That's right. I was contacted during the ice storm, and everyone else decided to go home and move that day, and I got within 3 miles of Berry and couldn't make it. And then it took me 6 hours to get home. And I live right off of Rocky Ridge Road in the Lingate subdivision.
And then Hoover, they use the buses, some of the buses, to help stranded drivers.
Right.
And, so they have those buses. And I just wanted to point out, this is the first educator that the students will see when they get on the bus. No matter the circumstances, maybe there's been a tragedy in the family, somebody's upset, this is the first person they're going to see.
And the last they see.
And the last they see.
I can say, having driven from one end of Valleydale to the other, I live in River Chase, and my doctor is in Inverness. At 7:30 in the morning, trying to get from one end to the other takes almost an hour.
Does anyone know who the gentleman was that named
Well,
that?
I'll talk to you off the record first and see what you want. I don't know who you are. Okay.
She's a BHM radio station.
I would like to thank WBHM and AL.com for setting up this meeting. This is really great. We'd like to see you come back periodically to do this again. Hopefully there will be some elements that will change and more people will be encouraged to come and attend this. But thank you for leaving the safe confines of Birmingham and coming out here to the Wild West called Hoover.
Thank you for having us.
Hoover's happening, I believe.
Thanks, y'all.